Andy, give it a push.
It's now 7, top of the tide. The tide is just over 10 metres. We're doing the final checks and then we'll be on our way out through the gates and turn to port and on down to Portishead. We've just left the lock gate, the outer sea lock, and we're now going out onto the Severn, and we're just about to turn to port down towards Barclay Power Station. The high tide appears to have stopped, although we'll see in a moment. We're looking at the end of the pier on the port side. There's very little movement around it. We're now turning to port off the end of the pier, and I think we're really right on top of the tide now. Here we go. As we approach the old Severn Bridge, the wind is fairly strong from the west-southwest, and just on the right there we're about to join the Wye, and in the distance you can see the new Severn crossing. Ahead is the new Severn Bridge and the navigation channel markers, and you can see the water on the Wye. It's almost as though it's bubbling. You can see it standing. We've now come on to Portishead Pier. There's a boat coming out. We've got a green light to go in, and that's taken 2 hours and 21 minutes, and it's about 21.5 miles. Before we left Portishead this morning, I spoke to Bristol VTS, the advisors of the ship coming in, and suggested that we go across the main channel at right angles. This is what we did, and that's the correct way to go across the channel. And you can now just see the ship coming into dock at Avonmouth. As we just come under the new bridge, forward and slightly left you'll see the inline transit markers, and on the right we're passing a cardinal point, and in the distance you can see where we actually go into the Wye and up and over the sandbar. Just passing under Chepstow Bridge, and the tide's really quite quick. It's a lot higher up than we thought it would be, so that means we can carry on up the river towards Tintern and probably be there in just over an hour. We've eased off the speed, we're now doing about 6.5 miles an hour. The castle's just coming in on the left hand side, big long bend, and then we're out into the Wye Valley proper. As we come round the last bend, we come onto a straight, and in the distance you can just see Tintern Abbey with the sun setting behind it. As we pass Tintern Abbey, you then go under the bridge, and there's a long right-hand bend through Tintern and up towards Brockweir. On the left, just as we're going through Tintern, there's this right-hand bend, and on the bend there's a guy who, every time there's a flood, he pulls in the debris, the flotsam, trees, and he actually makes a living out of cutting them up and selling the firewood. And then we approach the road bridge at Brockweir.
We're into the river.
Oh, what?
The river's going downhill.
Yeah. Soon find out now. key is gone.
We've just gone through the bridge at Brockweir. The quays now is flooded over topped it, and we're now looking towards the sun setting at the river, and we just come into Llandogo at that point. At 7 o'clock the noise of the river had changed and the tide was on the way back in. We quickly pulled in the mooring lines. Andy got the camera on the deck, and by 2 minutes past 8 we slipped and we were on our way up the Wye on a rather large tide towards Bigsweir. There's a very nice shot there of Llandogo as the sun is just rising and illuminating and coming down the cliff face itself. We're now on the corner just below Bigsweir. We're starting to climb the Weir, and as we get round the corner there's a rather nice older house there on the right, which is I suppose the manor house, and as we clear the corner we should come into Bigsweir Bridge.
Yeah. Change the battery in it.
We've just cleared the top of the Weir. Normally you climb up the Weir, but the tide is quite a large one, and in front is Bigsweir Bridge. It's hard to imagine that this was one of the main roads down to Chepstow 100 years ago. We're now going under Bigsweir Bridge, and in the distance you could see the new Weir when we get a little bit closer. It's like this for the next sort of half a mile, I would think. And then we get back onto the river proper, where the tide has no effect, and we've got our 2.5 metres of flood water still coming down. We're now just coming to the end of the tide, and in the distance you can see the St Florence guest house on the right hand side, and you can see the Weir. There's a little tree on the left just as the river disappears, and if you look at the river there, you can see the disturbance and what there is, a fishing weir right across that point there, so you would actually walk over the top of that in the summer because it would be dry. As we get to the little tree, we're off the limit of the tidal navigation. It's no longer the responsibility of the Gloucester Harbour trustees. And we are now just passing Redbrook, which used to be, for hundreds of years, a place where they made paper and had a boat in once a month. We just passed the Redbrook quay, and in the distance we're about 2 miles from, in fact we're passing Redbrook now, and a gentleman waving at us. We're about now half a mile below Redbrook. The sun is getting up and coming over the right hand Forest of Dean and illuminating the left hand bank. We still have our 2.5 metres of flood water coming down, although it doesn't look like it from this film. We just spent 5 minutes trying to get round the corner at Redbrook. We've now found a spot where the water's a little bit slack, and we're off again, and we're doing about 2.5 miles an hour here as we go under the bridge and pass the boat in on the left port side. And ahead about half a mile is the next pinch point, where we'll move over to the right and starboard and pass some rather large rocks that are in the river, and there's only one way to go, and that's up the right hand side. If you look at the piers as we pass them, you can see the water passing. There's still about 2.5 metres of flood water on top of normal river level. As we clear the bridge, I look at my iPad and we got the navigation program. We've got a GPS marker on it, and we're doing very nearly 3 miles an hour. And if you look at the shot over Andy's head looking backwards at the bridge, it gives you some idea of what, when we go back down the river, you have to negotiate to get through and round the corner. It's interesting to say the least. If you look at the wake behind us, it gives you some idea of the course, and it also gives you some idea of the speed that we're making, and it's about 2.5 to 3 miles an hour against 2.5 metres of flood tide. We've now come up to just below Monmouth, and we have just passed a 20-arch stone viaduct that's been dismantled, and the only steel bridge left on the Wye is the one we're going under shortly. We're finding it a little difficult. We're doing about 2,500 revs. That's the most we can do, and what I believe it to be is that the water coming in from the Mono is lifted the river another 3 or 4 feet. If you look at the bank, you can see it's level, whereas when we come through Redbrook, you had 6 to 8 foot or 2 metres clearance between the top of the banks. So we'll have to just sit with it for a couple of minutes and slowly sneak up on it, and we should get through the bridge, and then we've got about 300 metres before we get to the road bridge of Monmouth. That's quite a nice shot. It's through the rugby field, and through the bridge, through the rugby field, and then you see the spire in Monmouth itself. I think you might call this the moment of truth. Will she or won't she? We are now doing 2,500 revs. It won't go any faster, and if you look at the GPS, you can see we're making about a quarter of a mile an hour, which appears to be nothing when you're looking at the film, but it's sufficient to creep up on it and get past the confluence of the Mono and the River Wye, which are just around the corner. This is normally a moment when you look at all your instruments, your temperature gauge, your revs and everything else, and lift the engine covers to see whether everything's okay, but it is. And as I said earlier on, you sneak up on it and it turns its back and you're actually under and round the corner, and that's about what we've done now. 200 or 300 yards and we will be right in front of the bridge, the road bridge at Monmouth. Just come to view now, you can see the main road going through and the traffic passing, and we're about 100 metres below the confluence of the Mono and the River Wye. In fact, Andy's taking a photograph of it now. We just had a camera shot of the downside of the road bridge at Monmouth. Now the problem is as you look at the bridge and we get a little closer, you've got to decide which arch to go through. But before this road came through in the early 1970s, all where you see the trucks now was warehousing, which is hard to imagine, and this was the pool where the boats would tie up or come and unload the cargo or wait for water to get upriver to Hereford, well, 150 years ago, before the railways came. Here we are now just below the bridge, and what I've done is looked at the 3 arches. I was going to go through the 2 nearest to the left, but with the 2.5 metres of water on, I wasn't sure that if we went through them we wouldn't be swept sideways onto the bridge piers, So what I've decided to go is to go on the third bridge from the left, even though there's more water coming through it. I mean, as you look at the bridge now, you can see there's a little bit more water coming through the third arch from the left, and it really doesn't look anything to be, wind it up, put the revs on and go straight through the centre. But when we get into it, it's a little bit more than that. It's almost like trying to climb up a waterfall, which you in a few seconds will see on the film. I'm trying to think of some words to say, but I think it's best just to leave it alone and let you sort of enjoy the moment. The problem with climbing slow out of an arch rather than putting the revs on and going through the arch, the water isn't as thick as it should be. Its viscosity is nil, so you don't have the power. And then you get halfway through the arch and the water then hasn't got all the little bubbles in it. It's not aerated, so the propeller starts to bite, and at that point you start to climb up, and there's a 2-foot weir of water, or wall of water, to get over, and you can see that by the way that the attitude of the boat was as we were coming through. And as soon as we get on top of that water, then the forward section of the boat, the bow section, will actually drop back down, and you can see that on the film. And I suppose the other point, this is all in real time, it's not been shortened. This is actually how long it took us to get through, not to do it, to actually navigate through the arch itself with the flood water coming down. And just coming into view now is Monmouth Rowing Club and the old Monmouth Quay, just on the port side there where we'll tie up. And Wye Invaders, the first narrowboat ever to make it this far up the River Wye. And it's now just 11 o'clock, so that's 2 minutes past 8 until 11 o'clock, which I think is not bad for about 15 miles.